I'd lived on that ranch for 15 peaceful years before the subdivision sprouted up across the county road. At first, I didn't mind it. New families, fresh paint, shiny SUVs, people looking for quiet country life. What I didn't know was that their peace and quiet came with bylaws, committees, and a woman named Karen who believed authority was her birthright. The first time I met her, I was mending my fence, that same cedar fence I built with my own hands back when gas was still $1 a gallon. I saw a woman in a sun hat marching toward me with a clipboard tucked under her arm, chin up like she was on parade. "Good morning," she chirped. "I'm Karen, president of the Meadow Hills Homeowners Association. You must be our new neighbor." I smiled politely. "Neighbor, not exactly. My property line ends a quarter mile before your subdivision starts." She frowned, glancing down at her clipboard like she'd just failed a math test. "Oh, but your ranch borders our community. You'll need to comply with some of our standards to keep consistency for everyone." I actually laughed out loud. "Consistency?" I said. "Ma'am, my cows don't care if your mailboxes match." Her face twitched. "We take pride in appearances here, and livestock fencing is unsightly." Now there are moments in life when you realize a storm is brewing. She was the kind of storm that doesn't just bring rain, it brings rules, fines, and neighborhood gossip. I leaned on my fence post. "This fence has stood here since before Meadow Hills was even a name on a developer's napkin. You've got no say over my land." Her smile froze like she'd just bitten into a lemon. "We'll see about that." And with that, she turned and strutted back toward her SUV, her heels clicking like gunfire on the gravel. I remember thinking, that woman's gonna be trouble. A week passed quietly enough. I figured she'd drop the whole thing. But then I opened my mailbox one afternoon and found a bright yellow envelope marked HOA Notice of Violation. I tore it open. It said, "Dear property owner, you are in violation of community standards due to unauthorized fencing and livestock visible from Meadow Hills property lines. Please remove said structures and animals or be fined $150 per day." I stared at it dumbfounded. Then I laughed so hard I nearly scared the horses. I thought, all right, Karen, if this is how you want to play, let's play. I went inside, dusted off my old letterhead from my law firm days, and typed out a short reply. "Dear HOA Board, I appreciate your concern for local aesthetics. However, you appear to be attempting to assert authority beyond your recorded jurisdiction. Please consult county property maps before sending further correspondence. Respectfully, the property owner." I didn't sign it with my name, didn't mention I was a retired attorney. Sometimes it's fun to let the other side underestimate you. 3 days later, I was out feeding the horses when I saw her again, standing on the edge of my property line, holding her phone up, taking pictures like a wildlife photographer who just spotted a rare species. "Hey," I called out, "you planning to start a calendar?" She lowered her phone and said, "Just documenting, we'll need evidence for the board meeting." I smiled, "Make sure you get my good side." That smirk of hers faltered just for a second, then she spun around and marched off again. That night, as the sun dipped behind the hills, I couldn't shake the feeling that this wasn't over. Not by a long shot. There was something about people like Karen, they didn't stop when they were wrong, they doubled down. I poured myself a cup of coffee and watched the porch lights flicker on across the field where Meadow Hills had planted itself like an invasive species. I could almost hear her somewhere over there, plotting her next official notice. And I'll admit, part of me was curious. How far would she go before she realized who she was really messing with? Because if there's one thing you should know about me, I don't back down easily. Especially not when someone thinks their HOA clipboard can outrank the law. So when the next letter arrived, the one that said, "Mandatory HOA meeting, attendance required," I just smiled. If Karen wanted to play attorney, I'd let her. But I was about to remind her what it looks like when a real one joins the game. The letter arrived on a Thursday, right before lunch. I was halfway through my sandwich when I saw the Meadow Hills logo printed neatly in the corner, a little tree with perfectly symmetrical branches, like it had never seen real dirt. Inside was a fine, $500 for continued violation of community standards. I actually checked the envelope twice just to make sure they hadn't accidentally mailed it to the wrong person. Nope, it was addressed to me, my ranch, my name, my land that's been here since before half their residents were even born. For a few seconds, I just stood there in my kitchen, holding that letter like it might start smoking. Then I laughed, the kind of laugh that comes from deep down, the one you can't help when something is so ridiculous it crosses into comedy. $500, I said out loud, shaking my head. Karen, you've got guts. I went to my office, a small room lined with old law books and plaques from another life. My days as a practicing attorney were behind me, but the smell of paper, the sharp click of a stapler, even the feel of legal stationery, it all came rushing back. So I pulled a blank page from my old firm's letterhead. The gold embossing still shimmered at the top. I sat down and started typing. To the Meadow Hills Homeowners Association. I acknowledge receipt of your notice dated March 22. While I appreciate your enthusiasm for local order, I must inform you that your association's jurisdiction does not extend to properties beyond your recorded plat. My ranch, located on Parcel 14, is privately owned and predates the existence of Meadow Hills. Any attempt to levy fines, impose restrictions, or conduct inspections on my property constitutes a violation of state and county trespass laws. I recommend you review your governing documents before issuing further correspondence. Respectfully, the property owner. No signature, no name, just that title. I printed it, sealed it, and dropped it off at the HOA mailbox myself. By sunset, I could almost feel the collective panic echoing from the subdivision across the road. I imagined Karen gathering her little board members in someone's living room, waving my letter like it was a coded threat. And honestly, it kind of was. 2 days later, I heard tires crunching on my gravel driveway. I looked up from the barn and saw her, Karen herself, stepping out of her SUV, this time with a man in a polo shirt and khakis. He looked like the type who said, per my last email, in real life. I wiped my hands on a rag and walked toward them. Afternoon, I said, something I can help you folks with. Karen straightened her blazer. Yes, we received your letter. You can't just ignore community enforcement. You live next to Meadow Hills, which means your property impacts our residents. I tilted my head. Impacts how exactly? She hesitated. Your livestock is visible from our homes. It lowers property values. That's when I laughed. I couldn't help it. Lady, this is cattle country. You moved next to a ranch. What do you think you'd see out here? A golf course. The man in khakis stepped forward, clearly nervous. Sir, we just want to find a reasonable solution. Reasonable, I said. Reasonable would have been not mailing me a $500 fine for owning cows. Karen crossed her arms. You'll regret this attitude when we escalate it. I leaned in slightly, just enough for her to catch the calm in my voice. Karen, I've been through depositions nastier than your board meetings. Be careful what you escalate. Her jaw tightened. For the first time, I saw something flicker behind those sharp eyes, not anger but uncertainty. They turned and walked back to their car without another word. The man glanced back at me once, like he wanted to apologize but didn't. When their SUV disappeared down the road, I stood there for a while, the wind moving through the tall grass. I knew how this game worked. I'd played it in courtrooms with real stakes. And Karen, she didn't understand yet that every move she made was now building my case, not hers. That night, I poured myself a drink and sat out on the porch. The moonlight hit the edge of my fence, silver and strong. I smiled to myself. You wanted a fight, Karen, I murmured. You're about to get one you can't win. And as if on cue, my phone buzzed with an email notification. It was from the HOA board. Subject line, mandatory attendance, property review meeting. Perfect. The stage was set. The spotlight was hers. And I was about to walk right into her show on my terms. The email said the meeting would be held at the community clubhouse, attendance required. I had no intention of going until curiosity got the better of me. See, in my experience, there's nothing quite as dangerous as someone who thinks they know the law but never opened a law book. And judging by her letters, Karen was a walking, talking case study. So that Tuesday evening, I put on my cleanest jeans, a pressed button-up, and my old leather boots that still creaked when I walked. I grabbed a rolled-up copy of the county zoning map and drove the short mile to Meadow Hills. When I pulled up, the parking lot was already full of shiny cars, lined up like trophies. The clubhouse itself looked like something straight out of a realtor's dream, fake stone, bright lights, and a banner out front that said Community Matters. I stepped inside and felt every eye turn toward me. A long table sat at the front with 5 board members behind it, Karen dead center, gavel in hand, her smile thin as thread. She tapped the gavel once, tap tap. Welcome everyone, let's begin with item number 3, the issue of Mr. Ah, the property owner. Someone in the back chuckled under their breaths. I found an empty chair near the middle and sat down, unrolling my map beside me. Karen cleared her throat. As you know, we've had ongoing issues with the ranch next to our community. Despite multiple notices, the owner has refused compliance and continues to keep livestock and unsightly fencing visible from several of our homes. A woman in the audience raised her hand, but isn't that outside the HOA boundary? Karen gave a tight-lipped smile. Technically, yes, but his property impacts our aesthetic and therefore our property values. Our bylaws allow us to address adjacent violations. That's when I couldn't help it, I laughed, loud enough for the whole room to hear. Karen's head snapped toward me. Something funny, sir. I stood up slowly, holding the map under my arm. Yes, ma'am, I find it hilarious that anyone believes they can enforce bylaws on property they don't own. She blinked. Excuse me. I walked to the front of the room, unrolling the map right across the meeting table. This, I said, pointing, is your development, Meadow Hills, all of this inside your little box, that's your jurisdiction. Then I traced my finger down to the edge. And this, I tapped the area in bold marker, is my land, county-recognized parcel, surveyed and recorded in 1998. You can't govern what you don't own, Karen, not even with matching mailboxes. The room went quiet except for the faint hum of the overhead lights. Karen's jaw tightened. Sir, you can't just barge into our meeting and… I was invited, I said, waving the email on my phone. Mandatory attendance, remember. A couple of people chuckled. One guy even clapped before Karen shot him a death glare. She tried to recover. Regardless, this behavior is disruptive to the harmony of our community. Harmony? I grinned. Lady, you're trying to fine a man for owning a horse in Texas. The board members shifted uncomfortably. One older gentleman leaned toward her and whispered something that made her face redden. I leaned forward slightly. Tell you what, Karen, you stop trespassing on my property and I'll stop sending your letters back with legal citations attached. Deal. Her eyes narrowed. Are you threatening me? No, I said, calm as can be. I'm educating you for free. A few muffled laughs rippled through the crowd. Karen slammed her gavel down. Bang, that's enough. This meeting is adjourned. She gathered her papers and stormed off, muttering something under her breath. The board followed, leaving behind a room full of whispering neighbors and one very amused rancher. As I rolled up my map, one man approached me, a tall fellow in a baseball cap. You know, he said, most of us don't agree with her, she's just loud. I nodded. Loud doesn't scare me. Ignorant with authority, though, that's another story. He chuckled. You're gonna give her a heart attack. Not my goal, I said, heading for the door. But if she keeps crossing that fence line, the sheriff might get to her first. When I stepped outside, the sun was dipping low, bleeding orange across the horizon. I stood by my truck for a moment, breathing in the quiet. It felt like a victory, small but satisfying. Still, something told me Karen wasn't finished. She wasn't the type to lose gracefully. And sure enough, when I got home that night, I saw headlights sweep across my pasture. I looked out the window and caught a glimpse of a figure near the fence, camera in hand, flash blinking in the dark. I smiled to myself. Well, Karen, I muttered, reaching for my phone, you just crossed the wrong line again. I hit record. The night clicked into focus. And that was the moment I realized this wasn't just about a fence anymore. It was about teaching her what boundaries really meant. It was barely sunrise when I saw movement near the north pasture. The horses hadn't even stirred yet, but there she was, Karen, marching across my property line like she owned the place. 2 other people trailed behind her, both holding clipboards and cameras. For a second, I just stood on the porch, coffee mug in hand, trying to convince myself I was still dreaming. But nope, there she was, in her neat khakis and visor, snapping pictures of my barn like she was conducting a real estate inspection. I muttered to myself, you've got to be kidding me. Then I set my coffee down, grabbed my phone, and started recording. As I walked toward the fence, the morning air carried that mix of dew and dust that always clings to the countryside. My boots crunched against the gravel, and with each step, Karen's voice grew louder. This is clear evidence, she was saying to one of her lackeys. Look at those troughs, non-compliant water structures, absolutely unacceptable. I nearly laughed out loud. Non-compliant water structures, lady, those are horse troughs. When I got close enough, I called out, morning, you folks lost. Karen jumped, spinning around so fast her visor nearly flew off. "We're conducting an inspection," she snapped, regaining her composure. "On my property?" I asked. "This area falls within the visual boundary of Meadow Hills," she said, tapping her clipboard. "That gives us a right to inspect violations affecting the community." I held up my phone, the red recording light blinking. "Actually, what you just did crossing that fence is called trespassing, and this," I said, angling the phone at her, "is Exhibit A." Her two assistants froze. One of them started backing away toward the fence. Karen's face, though, flushed red as a stop sign. "Delete that footage immediately," she demanded. "You can't record me without consent." I grinned. "Sure I can, I'm on my property and you're standing on it illegally." She took a step closer, voice trembling but sharp. "You're going to regret this." "Doubt it," I said, "but you might." That's when she made the mistake that sealed her fate. She reached over the fence and smacked my phone. It didn't fall, but she definitely touched me. The whole thing was caught on camera. "Oh, thank you for that," I said calmly. "That's not just trespass anymore, Karen, that's assault." Her mouth opened, but no words came out. Her assistants looked horrified. I'm leaving," one of them stammered, scrambling back over the fence. The other followed, muttering something about not wanting to be involved. Karen stood there for another second, chest heaving, eyes burning holes through me. Then she turned on her heel and stormed away, her shoes sinking into the soft dirt as she crossed back onto her side of the line. I stopped recording and checked the video. Perfect, clear audio, clear shot, time-stamped, it was gold. By the time I got back to the house, my coffee was cold, but it was worth it. I uploaded the footage to a private cloud folder titled Karen Incident, April 12. Then I poured myself another cup and sat down to write a short, polite email. To the Meadow Hills HOA Board. This morning, 3 members of your association unlawfully entered my property without permission, documented private assets, and attempted to interfere with livestock operations. Please be advised that any further unauthorized entry will result in criminal trespass charges being filed with the county sheriff's office. Regards, the property owner. I hit send. An hour later, my phone rang. The caller ID said unknown, but I didn't need to guess. "Delete that footage," she hissed the moment I picked up. "Good morning to you too, Karen," I said, calm as ever. "This isn't funny, you're harassing me with that video." I leaned back in my chair, smiling. "Funny, I was thinking the same thing about you walking across my ranch." "You don't know who you're dealing with," she said, her voice cracking between rage and panic. "Oh, I do," I replied. "I'm dealing with someone who doesn't know property law." There was a long pause, then click, she hung up. That night, I poured myself a bourbon and sat out on the porch under the stars. The fence glowed silver under the moonlight, sturdy and calm, just like it had always been. I knew she wasn't done. Karen didn't strike me as the kind of woman who accepted reality easily. If she couldn't win through intimidation, she'd try something bigger, something louder. And I was right. A week later, I came home to find a white envelope taped to my gate. The words printed across the top made me laugh out loud. Notice of legal action, Meadow Hills Homeowners Association versus property owner. Oh, Karen. You just turned this into a game I used to get paid to win. I walked into the HOA clubhouse that evening knowing I wasn't there as just another homeowner. I was there as a man who'd been wrongfully dragged through mud. Karen's lawsuit was a bluff, and tonight I was going to call it. The place was packed, every seat taken, every head turning as I entered. Even the air felt heavy. You could hear the murmur stop, replaced by whispers. Karen was already there, standing at the front like she owned the place. She wore her trademark pastel blazer, pearls gleaming, holding a stack of papers like they were holy scripture. "Well, look who decided to join us," she said, voice dripping with fake sweetness. "I hope you're ready to apologize for your behavior." I smiled. "Actually, Karen, I'm here to discuss yours." The audience shifted in their seats. I could tell they weren't expecting that. "Excuse me," she said, clutching her folder. "This meeting is about your violation of HOA ordinances. You denied a community member access to shared land." I stepped forward, calm as ever. "Karen, my ranch isn't shared land. It's private property, deeded, fenced, and legally separate. But you already knew that, didn't you?" A low murmur rippled through the crowd. One of the board members, a nervous man named Larry, cleared his throat. "Karen, is that true?" Karen straightened. Of course not, he's twisting facts the association has rights to. Show them, I interrupted, handing a folder to Larry. These are the original property deeds, zoning maps, and HOA bylaws, the same ones filed at the county clerk's office. Notice anything? Larry scanned the papers, eyes widening. This property, it's not under HOA jurisdiction. The room erupted into whispers. Karen's face drained of color. Wah, that's impossible, she stammered. The maps must be outdated. I smiled. Outdated? That's from your own office, dated last year. You signed the acknowledgement letter yourself. You can pretend not to remember, but paper doesn't lie. Her mouth opened, then shut again. See, I continued, when you sued me for banning you from community land, you filed a false claim. You tried to assert HOA authority over private acreage. That's not a violation, that's fraud. The word fraud hung in the air like smoke. Karen's lips trembled. You can't accuse me of that. Actually, I said, pulling out another paper, I can. I filed a counterclaim this morning. Since I'm a retired attorney, I'll be representing myself, saves me a lot of money. The crowd went silent. A few board members shifted uncomfortably. Even the HOA treasurer looked like he wanted to disappear. Karen's hand shook as she pointed at me. You can't intimidate this board. I leaned in slightly, voice low but steady. I'm not intimidating anyone, I'm just reminding you, Karen, you picked the wrong person to bully. She slammed her folder shut, eyes blazing. This meeting is over. But it was. Because just then, Larry spoke up again. No, it's not. I move to motion a vote to suspend Karen as HOA president until this is resolved. The room exploded, voices overlapping, people standing, neighbors finally speaking up after months of being silenced. One woman from the back shouted, about time someone held her accountable. Karen turned pale. You can't do this, I built this association. I looked at her calmly, and now it's falling apart because of your greed. The vote passed. By the end of that night, Karen wasn't HOA president anymore. But victory wasn't the end, it was just the start of something worse. Because the next morning when I went out to feed the horses, I found my ranch gate wide open, tire tracks all over my gravel drive, fence broken, and my cattle gone. Karen might have lost her title, but she wasn't done with me yet. I stood there staring at the empty field, wind howling through the barbed wire. My jaw tightened. This isn't over, I whispered, not by a long shot. That night, I set up security cameras, called the sheriff, and filed another report. But deep down, I knew who was behind it, and this time, I wasn't waiting for justice to show up. I was going to bring it myself. By sunrise, my ranch looked like a crime scene. The gate hung half off its hinges, the ground torn up by truck tires, and the air felt heavier than usual. That strange, still kind of quiet that comes right before something big breaks. I didn't touch a thing. Instead, I went straight inside, brewed a cup of coffee, and started scrolling through the footage from the security cameras I'd set up the week before. And there it was, 3 trucks rolling in around 2 a.m., headlights off, 2 men jumping out, cutting the lock on the gate. They moved fast, like they'd done this before. Then I saw it, the reflection of blonde hair under the moonlight. Karen. She wasn't driving, but she was there, standing just beyond the fence line, pointing, directing, watching my cattle being herded away. I took a slow sip of my coffee and smiled, the kind of smile that comes when anger turns into purpose. 2 hours later, Sheriff Daniels' cruiser pulled up the drive. Daniels was an old friend. We'd coached Little League together before he ever put on the badge. He stepped out, squinting against the morning sun. Morning, Tom, he said, looking around the damage. Heard you had some trouble. Yeah, I said, motioning toward the house. You're gonna want to see this. Inside, I played the footage for him. His jaw tightened when he saw the trucks, but when Karen's figure appeared on screen, he let out a low whistle. Well, I'll be damned, he muttered. She really doesn't know when to quit. I nodded. You see her point, that's her directing it, that's criminal trespass, theft, and vandalism all in one night. Daniel scratched his chin. And she thought she could get away with this after you humiliated her at that meeting? You must have really hit a nerve. I leaned back in my chair. She thought she'd scare me into backing off, but now I'm pressing charges. Daniels grinned. You want me to go pay her a visit? Not yet, I said. Let's make sure she digs her own hole first. Later that afternoon, I drove down to the feed store, and that's when I saw them. My missing cattle, penned behind a rented trailer out back, tags still on them. The owner of the place, Rick, came out wiping his hands. Hey, Tom, he said. Funny thing, some folks brought these in last night, said they were moving them from your ranch for the HOA, told me you approved it. I raised an eyebrow, did they now? Rick frowned, yeah, I didn't think you'd do that without calling me first. I smiled, you did right, Rick, mind if I take a few photos? Be my guest, he said, you gonna press charges? Oh, I'll do more than that, I replied. That night I called Daniels again and sent him the photos and footage. He promised to handle it by the book, which I respected, but I also knew Karen wasn't the type to admit guilt easily. The next morning, he went over to her house. From what he told me later, she came to the door all smiles, pretending to be shocked by the accusation. Cattle theft me, she said, clutching her pearls like she'd just heard a ghost story. Sheriff, you must be mistaken. Daniel said she kept her act up until he mentioned the footage. Her face fell. Footage, she asked, voice cracking. Yep, Daniels told her. Crystal clear, you might want to call your lawyer, Karen. This is bigger than HOA business now. She slammed the door on him. By evening, my phone rang again, this time from a number I didn't recognize. Tom, said the voice on the line. This is Attorney Wallace representing Mrs. Cartwright. My client wishes to avoid escalation. Perhaps we can discuss a private settlement. I chuckled, tell your client I don't settle with thieves. He sighed, you're making a mistake, Mr. Carter. This could get messy. It's already messy, I said and hung up. That night, as I sat on the porch, watching the sun go down over the pasture, I saw a black SUV creeping past my driveway, slow, deliberate, the kind that doesn't belong on country roads. I leaned back, watching its taillights vanish into the dark. Karen wasn't giving up, she was planning something new, something bolder. And I was ready for it. I knew Karen wasn't the type to lick her wounds quietly. When she vanished for a week after the sheriff's visit, it wasn't relief I felt, it was unease. That woman didn't hide, she schemed. By the 8th day, my hunch was confirmed. I got a letter not from her lawyer this time, but from the county court. It was a new lawsuit. Karen had filed again, but this time she wasn't acting as HOA president. She was acting as an individual property owner, claiming defamation and intentional distress. I couldn't help but laugh when I read it. Defamation, I muttered, staring at the bold words. That's rich coming from the woman who stole my cattle. Still, something about the filing caught my attention. The language was too precise, too professional. Karen wasn't smart enough to write like that, which meant someone was helping her. The next morning, I stopped by the courthouse to review the case file in person. The clerk, a friendly older woman named Patty, gave me a look as she handed over the folder. She's been in here a lot lately, she said quietly. Always with some guy, wears a suit, looks like one of them city attorneys. I flipped open the file and froze when I saw the signature. Attorney of record, Michael Granger. That name hit like a punch. Granger wasn't just any lawyer, he was a former rival from my days in practice. The man hated losing and he hated me more. We'd gone head-to-head in 3 cases years ago, I'd beaten him every time. So that's what this was. Karen had found herself an ally, someone with a grudge. The next week was quiet, too quiet. My neighbors avoided me, some whispering when I passed. HOA gossip spreads faster than wildfire. By the time I walked into the grocery store, folks were already murmuring about how I'd slandered Karen, how the poor woman was traumatized by my public humiliation of her at the meeting. Granger was playing the long game, poisoning the well before court. Fine, 2 could play that game. When the court date came, the room was packed. Even the local paper had sent a reporter. Karen sat at the plaintiff's table in a pastel suit, looking fragile and innocent, while Granger leaned in close, whispering like a viper in her ear. I represented myself, of course. A retired attorney defending his own land against a woman who didn't know when to quit, that alone had the audience's curiosity. The judge, a stern man named Judge Perry, adjusted his glasses. Mrs. Cartwright, your complaint claims that Mr. Carter defamed you publicly and caused emotional distress. You may proceed. Karen rose, putting on her best trembling act. Your Honor, I've been the victim of harassment and slander. Mr. Carter has spread lies about me, called me a criminal, humiliated me at a community meeting, and even involved the sheriff in false accusations. Granger stood and added smoothly, we intend to prove Mr. Carter acted maliciously, Your Honor. When it was my turn, I stood slowly, calm as still water. Your Honor, the plaintiff left out one detail, she was involved in criminal activity, and I have proof. The courtroom buzzed. I reached into my briefcase and pulled out a USB drive. This contains security footage from my ranch. It shows Mrs. Cartwright trespassing on my property at 2 a.m., overseeing the removal of my livestock. Granger smirked. "Objection, Your Honor, the video's authenticity hasn't been established." I smiled. "That's why the sheriff is here." Sheriff Daniels stood from the back of the courtroom and raised a hand. "That footage was verified by our office. We recovered the stolen cattle from a feed lot the following morning." The room went dead silent. Karen's face turned white. Granger's smirk faded. Judge Perry looked from me to Karen. "Mrs. Cartwright, is this true?" Karen fumbled for words. I didn't, they said it was." "Enough," the judge snapped. "This is no longer a civil matter. Counselor, your client may want to stop talking." I didn't say a word. I didn't need to. After a few moments, Judge Perry cleared his throat. "Mr. Carter, your motion to dismiss this case is granted, and based on this new evidence, I'm forwarding the matter to the district attorney's office for review." Karen gasped. Granger looked like he'd swallowed a lemon. I packed my things slowly, feeling the kind of satisfaction that only truth brings. But as I walked out of the courthouse, I saw something that made my smile fade. Karen wasn't defeated. She was whispering to Granger, eyes narrow, hands shaking, not from fear but from fury. And when I stepped outside, I noticed a black SUV parked across the street, the same one that had passed my ranch at night. Someone inside was watching me. Whatever Karen had planned, it wasn't over yet. For a few days after the court hearing, the town felt still, the kind of silence that comes after a storm, calm but deceptive. Karen had been humiliated publicly, her case dismissed, her reputation in ruins, but knowing her, she wasn't done, not yet. I could feel it in my bones. She was plotting her next move. That night around 11:30, I was sitting on the porch with a cup of coffee, watching the moonlight crawl over the fence line. That's when I heard it, a low rumble in the distance. Then 2 sets of headlights appeared on the dirt road leading to my ranch. I set the mug down, reached for my flashlight, and stood still, waiting. The trucks rolled closer, unmarked, blacked-out windows. One stopped by the gate, the other kept rolling right up the drive. "Here we go again," I muttered under my breath. I stepped out, beam of the flashlight cutting through the dark. "Evening," I called. "If you're lost, you took a real wrong turn." The driver door opened, and out stepped none other than Michael Granger, the same smug attorney who tried to bury me in court. He wasn't alone. Behind him came Karen, her hair tied back, face hard and pale in the moonlight. "Tom," Granger said smoothly, "we're here to serve you with an injunction." I tilted my head. "At midnight, you city lawyers sure have funny work hours." Karen crossed her arms. "You won't be laughing for long. We filed a new motion this evening, one that freezes your assets until our appeal is heard." I chuckled. "Karen, you lost. You can't appeal a dismissal based on criminal evidence." Her voice rose. "You think you can ruin me, make me look like a fool in front of everyone." I took a slow step forward. "No, Karen, you did that yourself." Granger looked uncomfortable. "Let's just make this simple, Carter. Sign this agreement, release the footage, and we'll walk away. Otherwise, this gets ugly." I smirked. "Granger, the moment you trespassed on my land, it already got ugly." That's when the floodlights snapped on, every one of them. My whole ranch lit up like a stadium. Sheriff Daniels' cruiser rolled in behind them, followed by 2 deputies. Karen's jaw dropped. What is this?" Daniels stepped out, holding a folder. "It's called timing, ma'am. We've been tracking your movements for a week. You two shouldn't have come here tonight." He turned to me. "Tom, you might want to step back." I did, and then the sheriff turned to Karen. "Mrs. Cartwright, you're under arrest for trespassing, vandalism, and attempted intimidation. Mr. Granger, you're coming with us for conspiracy to obstruct justice." Karen's face went blank, the kind of shock that freezes every muscle. You can't do this. I'm the victim here." Daniels shook his head. "Not anymore." As they cuffed her, she started screaming, "You don't know who I am. You'll regret this. You all will." I just stood there, hands in my pockets, watching as the flashing red and blue lights reflected off the barn walls. When the last car pulled away, the night returned to silence. The only thing left was the wind, soft, steady, carrying the sound of crickets across the fields. I walked back to the porch, sat down, and finally took a deep breath. It was over. A few weeks later, the DA's office confirmed that Karen had taken HOA funds for personal use. Granger had been quietly disbarred for his role in the cover-up. The HOA voted to dissolve and reform under new leadership, folks who actually cared about the community. And me, I went back to ranching, mending fences, fixing the land Karen tried so hard to control. One afternoon, as I was feeding the horses, a young couple from the neighborhood stopped by. The husband smiled awkwardly. "Hey, Mr. Carter, we just wanted to say thank you for standing up to her. No one else had the guts." I smiled back. "You don't need guts to face people like Karen. You just need to know the law and have the patience to let them hang themselves with their own rope." They laughed, waved, and drove off. As the sun dipped behind the ridge, I leaned on the fence post, listening to the cattle lowing in the distance. Funny thing about people like Karen, they think power comes from titles, meetings, and threats. But real power, it's quieter. It's knowing who you are, standing your ground, and never letting fear drive you off your own land. I took one last look at the horizon, the sky burning gold and orange. "Rest easy, girl," I murmured, patting my old ranch dog beside me. We finally got our peace back. And this time, it was mine to keep. Every HOA has a story on HOA Headaches. You'll hear the ones they tried to bury. Subscribe today.